This is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're exploring what the governor's budget proposal does and doesn't do to combat hunger in the Empire State. And to make sense of these questions, we're joined on the Capitol Press Room by Natasha Pernicka, Executive Director of the Alliance for a Hunger-Free New York, which represents a coalition of emergency food providers across the state. So, Natasha, let's start with the positive. The governor's budget proposal includes funding to upgrade EBT cards to prevent SNAP benefit fraud. There's money for expanding summer meal sites and additional dollars for food banks, as well as support for the Hunger Prevention and Nutrition Assistance Program, as well as Nourish New York, which ultimately connects farms with hungry people. Of the initiatives I just outlined, or maybe something I missed, anything stand out to you from the governor's proposal that you're particularly excited about?
Well, I'm pretty pleased about our overall approach to addressing food insecurity in our state at different population groups. I'm very excited about the transition to move to secure EBT chip cards. We saw other states implement that, and in California, they realized more than 80% reduction in SNAP theft due to skimming, which is incredibly important for people who rely on SNAP.
Yeah, and can you talk about why this matters to them? Because if your benefits are stolen,
you don't get any benefit. They're gone. So what happens is people will go to a grocery store to use their EBT card, and they think they have, $100 to spend, and they are then told there's zero money there to spend on groceries, and they're taken off guard because someone has skimmed their EBT card and has used those benefits, basically stealing the benefits.
And the expectation is that with these chip-enabled cards, when they roll out, something like that fraud is going to be at least harder to do.
Yes. Like I said, in California, there was a more than 80% reduction in theft, EBT theft, due to the implementation.
Well, what else in this budget? Because there are some recurring programs that the governor is funding, like the Hunger Prevention and Nutrition Assistance Program, as well as the Nourish New York program, which became very popular during the pandemic.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important to see that there are efforts made to increase hunger prevention, nutrition assistance in Nourish New York. With the changes at the federal level to SNAP, most recently work requirement changes happened on March 1st. So we're anticipating a continued increase to more and more people turning to food pantries because there's no other options for them. And we have been asking for $75 million for both hunger prevention and for Nourish New York. Keep in mind, though, these numbers we've been asking for 3 years. So if we see these numbers in this year's budget, that's going to be a win. But we are going to need to be really realistic about moving forward the role that food pantries play in keeping people with food on the table. And how do we balance that from a government and state perspective with, free school meals is a win. That's a win. Expanding summer meals for kids is a win. But we tend to do patchwork. So summer meal program for kids, it's for the kids, but then where do the parents go to eat? They go to the food pantry, right? So we need to make sure that we're addressing it from all areas of age. Older adults, we're seeing here in New York's capital region, one of our largest increases in service levels at pantries last year was older adults, because, they're living on fixed incomes that aren't keeping up with food inflation. And so if we're going to make sure people aren't going without food, we've got to put the money where our mouths are, so to speak.
Well, sticking with the experience at food pantries, what are you bracing for as a result of the implementation of work requirement rules to SNAP? And when do you expect to see any sort of increase in demand? Is that something that's going to take time to really unfold, or is that something that this month, in March, as we speak, is going to have ramifications?
Yeah, we're anticipating this month, as people understand how they're impacted, that they will need to be turning to food pantries if they're no longer eligible for SNAP, if they're not able to work 20 hours a week. Mm-hmm. So this is an immediate intervention needed. And I think that's why it's important for people to realize that food pantries are available, don't have income limitations. But, is this really how we want to solve hunger? This is just a Band-Aid approach, but right now it's the best we have for filling in the gaps.
Well, thinking again about those gaps and how to prevent people from getting to that point where they're turning to a food bank, what could the state be doing that they're not as it pertains to either supporting some of the programs we talked about, like the Hunger Prevention and Nutrition Assistance Program, or maybe even augmenting what is being done at the federal level, like SNAP benefits, which I think for some people don't realize don't go as far for everyone, based on your income levels.
Yeah, I think for the state of New York to keep up with the changes, bolstering SNAP's incredibly important. Some people get as little as $24 a month in SNAP benefits, which doesn't go very far. So we are hoping to see a minimum benefit of $100. There is a request for $100 million to provide state supplemental establishing $100 minimum SNAP benefit, which would take the pressure off of food pantries. And also, if people are using SNAP benefits, they can go to a grocery store and purchase the foods that they're used to eating, that are culturally appropriate. Whereas, we do the best we can at food pantries, but we might not always have everything. It's more of a get what you get, even though we do the best to try to have dignity.
And the money that's being spent at the grocery store is supporting jobs and goes back into the economy. And I imagine from a broader perspective, that works better for the system as well.
Yeah, on average, for every dollar in SNAP benefit, there's economic activity of $1.50. So it actually is an economic driver.
Well, we've been having this conversation through the lens of what the state can do. What about our friends in the federal government? Is there something that Washington, D.C. could or should be doing right now to ensure that we're not dealing with an increase of hungry New Yorkers, let alone doing a better job of feeding the existing hungry New Yorkers?
I mean, really, we need to look at SNAP. What happened in H.R. 1 with SNAP was devastating and continues to be devastating as it rolls out. And that needs to be reversed. We need to make sure that SNAP benefits keep up with food inflation. Here in New York, food inflation is at 39% when you compare 2019 to 2025. So we need to make sure SNAP benefits are keeping up with food inflation. We also need to make sure that we're not creating more barriers to access, like the work requirements. It's just not, it's penalizing people. You shouldn't have to work for food. Food is food. I mean, let's ask the question, who deserves to eat? Everyone should be able to have enough food to eat with the resources that we have in this country. So really, it would be going back and removing the barriers to access and increasing the benefit level from SNAP perspective, from federal.
And coming back to your members, that coalition of emergency food providers all across the state, you mentioned the idea of food cost increases. What is that meaning for your capacity and your ability to feed people, especially with what we're seeing with, say, meat prices?
Yeah, it definitely impacts. I mean, when it hurts the consumer, it also hurts food pantries. Most of the food that pantries distribute, they actually pay for. Some of it is free, but most of it, there's actually a cost, and it costs us more as well. We've seen a lot of organizations in our coalitions, food budgets doubling over the past couple years. So everybody's needing to raise more money to keep up with the expenses, especially if we're focusing on healthy foods and fresh foods. That's where Nourish New York is an incredible program in our state, because it does help connect food banks and food pantries to local producers and farmers, which are making real food. Dairy, meats. Did you know New York State has a seafood industry? A lot of times we don't think about it, but these are really healthy, great food items to distribute through our charitable food system, along with, apples and cabbage and potatoes and onions, all the other things that our farmers are really great at producing here.
And what about listeners who want to support the work you're doing? What's the best way for them to go about doing that?
Yeah, we always encourage people to support their local neighborhood food pantry. And the best way for them to find food pantries, whether you are able to support or need help, is to go to thefoodpantries.org and click Find Food Now. We have a map of food pantries across the state of New York, so you can help in your local community, wherever you are.
Well, we've been speaking with Natasha Pernicka. She's the Executive Director of the Alliance for Hunger-Free New York. Natasha, thank you so much for making the time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for helping us highlight this issue.
Support for the Capitol Press Room is provided by New York State United Teachers, a statewide union of nearly 700,000 professionals in education and healthcare.